whites of their eyes. So could you take the house lights down? I'm not a performer, excuse me. So here we are in the theatre, a great place to tell you a story. But first, let me explain why I want to tell you this story. When I had children, I didn't live in Boston, and every time they said, "We're going to Boston this weekend," you can imagine what their classmates thought. They thought they were off to the airport to visit Massachusetts. It should have occurred to me then, but it didn't. Why don't people know Boston in the UK? When I came back here to live, what was hard to ignore was the low self-esteem that this town had developed. Perhaps it started with those documentaries about Boston being the fat capital, which weren't even based on people's weight, they were based on poverty demographics. Still, I understood why it felt like a kick in the teeth. When the headlines about murder capital, immigration and Brexit and crime all came in, it felt like decline. In the minds of some, Boston became a byword for trouble. The people who live here felt it deeply. That narrative eroded pride of place. As with everywhere, social media negativity became relentless. Extraordinary when you actually stop and look around you at the architecture, or read some of the history, or visit the Stump, or go on a history tour, or listen to the stories. And then, a few years ago, I got in a taxi to an event in Mayfair. The cabbie asked me where I was from, and I said Boston, and without skipping a beat, he replied, "Bandit country." And I was astounded. People had now heard of Boston, but it was not for the right reasons. Is it any wonder that people here have forgotten what a treasure they live in? From a marketing perspective, just the name Boston is a gift, an unrealised asset, because it's globally known. And when you dig a little deeper, you realise that this town is not coasting on a name. Its history is world class, history that, for a town its size, is second to none. Boston should be high on the itinerary of any American visiting Europe who wants to understand the roots of their nation, but it's not. Why? Perhaps because the story hasn't been told outside the history books very much. Not in a way that captures hearts and minds and imaginations of ordinary people. Yes, the history has been written, and it's in books, and some of those books have been written likely by people in this room. They know that history far better than I. But we need to retell it in a way that reaches ordinary people, people who don't consider themselves bookish, who don't think of heritage as something for them. Perhaps because they don't realise that our story can be entertaining, emotional, moving, and even economically powerful. Most historians are deeply connected with their studies, and history for them paints a picture in their mind, vivid and real. But for many, perhaps most people, they think of history as a dusty subject that they were taught at school, something for academics, or maybe posh people. An event in town celebrating history is not necessarily enough of a magnet to engage them when there's something good on telly. In order for history to resonate and pull people into a story, they need, sometimes, art to paint the picture for them. A painting or a novel, a film, TV series, or even a play. To turn dates and names into people and passions. To paint a story so vivid in their mind that they feel something. Let me give you some examples. There is a field in the Scottish Highlands, Drumwassy Moor, in a tiny village of Culloden. Many people know that name, and maybe they know the story vaguely. A battle, Highlanders, Bonnie Prince Charlie. Some may have heard of the 45. maybe not exactly what happened or where it was, but they certainly are unlikely to have made the trip all the way up to that remote Scottish field. But a story written by an American, heavy on romance, time travel, sexy Highlanders and snogging, became a bestseller, and Amazon picked it up and made it into a series, Outlander. And when that series aired in 2014, visitor numbers to Culloden more than doubled, from 50,000 to 120,000, and they kept rising. And over time, it has had a significant impact on visitor numbers for the whole region. People from all over the world arriving to Inverness, and it has kept going. Although the fictional love story drew them in through invented and reimagined characters, they connected with the real story and the real place. And it made people who have no connection or no interest in Scottish history feel something about a battle in a remote place. Feelings created through art, through character, drama, painting and picture, have the power to pull ordinary people towards a story or a place in a way that history alone cannot. Highclere Castle, well, that was a story that wasn't even theirs. Downton Abbey is pure fiction. But after it aired, their visitor numbers soared by 300%, bringing millions to the estate and the economy. And it certainly isn't limited to the power of the screen or Netflix. In America, the musical Hamilton, about a once obscure founding father, turned a largely forgotten national site, Hamilton Grange, that only ever engaged history enthusiasts into a pilgrimage destination. After that musical premiered on Broadway, Hamilton Lodge saw increased visitor numbers fourfold in 5 months, and by 2017 they had doubled again. Even Norway saw 40% surge in tourism when Frozen was released, animated princesses and ice castles turning a niche destination into a global draw. But it's not just about the numbers, it's about understanding and engaging. Versailles is a place where many people, perhaps most, are drawn to, not because of their interest and knowledge in French history or politics, not the architectural detail or what an engineering feat the Grand Canal and fountains are, but because many different tellings of that story and that place in books, art and drama have brought it to life for people, whether in films or on Netflix. When most people stand in that hall of mirrors, they are imagining Marie Antoinette or Louis XIV, revolution, romance, queens chased down corridors, peasants demanding bread at the gates. Because that story has been told in art so many times, people feel a connection with long dead people drawn vividly in their minds through storytelling. That comes from narrative, not stonework. It draws people in and it brings them back again. That's engagement, and that's what makes people come, care, stay and spend. So what's our story? We have links to Joseph Banks, King John, among others, Henry Bolingbroke, and of course the Hanseatic League. Too many stories to list here. For now, let's focus on the American connection. John Cotton, Anne Hutchinson, Pilgrims, and the foundation of Boston, Massachusetts. I expect most local people, even maybe some in this room, don't fully know the story. They know the headlines, and they maybe don't know the nuance or the drama or the why. Some even think it's not our story to tell. So we have an opportunity to bring it to life. Create characters people identify with. Paint a narrative. Make it resonate. That's what art can do for history. So back to that story I promised you. I'd like you to imagine it's now 2030 and you're sitting in this theatre, hopefully we've got air conditioning by then, and we're looking back. You're looking back to 2007 Can you remember that far back? It was the year that we just started keeping up with the Kardashians. Britney Spears shaved her head. There was another foot and mouth outbreak and major flooding and a bank crash. Maybe it doesn't feel so long ago. Now let's imagine that it's 1630. We might have been standing right here in Blackfriars. We can remember back to 1607. Can we remember what happened in these streets then? It was likely a vivid memory. You and I, ordinary people in Boston, with mums and dads and dogs and kids and jobs, probably wondering what's for supper. We certainly would have remembered that night when a ship loaded with people, women, children, mothers and fathers tried to escape. Probably, politically, it was a tricky time. Well, religiously, but that amounts to the same thing in those days. People hiding in that ship were hoping for safety and hoping for a new start in life somewhere that might as well have been a universe away. These people were trying to reach Holland, where they might worship freely, and they gathered in secret. And they travelled to the water's edge to a place called Scotia Creek, just up there. The plan had been simple: come in groups, by foot or boat, rendezvous with a larger ship and slip away unnoticed. Let's think about it. Were they frightened? Or maybe excited or brimming with optimism? Oh, it was freezing on that boat. No, wait, it was hot. It was probably hot, all those sweaty bodies below deck. Yes, that's more like it. Hot, clammy, airless. But they were betrayed. Customs men caught them. And it's said they were robbed and humiliated. They were marched back to Boston, through these streets, brought to the Guildhall, their leaders imprisoned in cells on the other side of that wall. Their families stayed here for a while, looked after by Bostonians, and then they were sent back to the towns and villages where they'd come from, places they'd tried to leave. Awkward. They must have been disappointed, or maybe relieved, perhaps embarrassed. But the point is that people who lived here at that time, Bostonians in 1630, they would certainly have remembered it, that night, that story, that scandal. And yet, despite that memory, many of those same people, or their neighbours, chose to make a similar journey. 10% of the townsfolk by 1634, they were likely farmers, councillors, traders, blacksmiths, midwives, school teachers, just like us. So, what would have inspired people like that, ordinary people, just to pack up their lives, abandon everything they had ever known and board a ship bound for what might as well have been Mars? The answer, in large part, was John Cotton. There were others too, Anne Hutchinson, and maybe, though for the purposes of this presentation, John Cotton can be star of our show. John Cotton, the famous preacher whose pulpit stands in St Botolph's, immaculate and probably very similar to how it looked in 1612 when he became the Vicar of Boston. Well, he must have been something pretty special. Why was he so convincing? I don't know. But what I do know is people walked for miles to hear him preach, and when they got here, they stood, not for 20 minutes or half an hour, but for 4 hours, sometimes 5 hours at a time, just to listen to this man talk. He must have been extraordinary, or maybe devastatingly attractive. He certainly had box office pulling power, not unlike Oasis or Taylor Swift. Choose your poison. He spoke to something in people. He moved them, gave them something to believe in. Who was he? What was his magic? Was he inspirational like the Obamas, or magnetic and rousing like Churchill? Maybe he had the cut-through and plain-speaking resonance of Mr. Trump, or the moral force of Martin Luther King. Whatever he had, it worked. because by 1630, ordinary people, real people from here, were prepared to walk away from everything they knew to take a voyage into the unknown. And when they got there, they named the place they founded after the town they came from, Boston. They founded a school based on the grammar school up the road. They called it the Boston Latin School, and it still exists, and it's the oldest school in the US. And it was a model for Harvard University. So, that's the sketch. Likely strewn with inaccuracies and exaggerations on my part. It's about real people, though, with real lives from a real place. So how do we tell this story? How do we make people feel something about this town? More than just today's headlines about potholes, barber shops, closed shops and dog mess. Well, first we need real professionals to flesh out characters and lend their talents to weaving the story. We need to tell it in a way that engages people. And 2030 is a big opportunity. Our plan is to do this with 2 pieces of work, and it starts now. It starts with children and young people. Part 1 of the plan is to tell the story locally in schools and theatre, and then we hope across Lincolnshire and possibly beyond. Think broadly, horrible histories, which, if you don't know, is a bit like Blackadder for kids. It's a brilliant series of books and TV shows that make the past feel alive, full of character and chaos and humour and human drama. Tell them how gross it is. Tell them about the rats and the toilets. Make them feel like it's real. We'll do something similar with John Cotton and the townsfolk, and maybe throw in a king. And we'll bring that story to life with excitement, humour and unforgettable moments. Professionally, with quality writing and acting, this piece of work, directed towards young people, is a foundation that will bring our kids up to speed before everyone else, ready for the events that this town is no doubt planning for 2030. And now for part 2, 2030, the big one. When 2030 arrives, we believe the impact of everything we do now could be transformational. Because if the people of this town, especially young people, understand the story and they've grown up hearing it, seeing it on the stage, laughing at it, remembering it, then every event, every celebration, every light show and exhibition, every walk and tour, it will mean something more. It will resonate differently. People will begin to identify with characters who once lived in these streets and think of them as real people. People just like them. Mums and dads with families and homes. People who went to the market, who went to the Guildhall, who worshipped at the Stump, who studied at the grammar school, walked these lanes and faced huge decisions. People who might have settled here from other places in modern times, they will see decisions that they once faced themselves reflected back at them in this work. Even people who are not interested in history will care. And understanding our audience's demographic, we believe that the best way to do this, and to reach all those people, is with a musical. I'm going to stop. Hamilton, Les Miserables, maybe The Crucible, smashed together. Hamilton took dusty American founding fathers and turned them into hip-hop legends. Les Mis Revolution, love, sacrifice, justice, all wrapped up in unforgettable songs and emotions. Arthur Miller's The Crucible. It wasn't really about witches. It was about power and fear, written in the shadow of McCarthyism. It made people look differently at their own society. That's what we're aiming for. Our musical will tell the story of the Exodus from Boston. It will be written and developed professionally with high quality writing, musicians, actors. A big, expensive project, but always with a place in its heart for local people to be part of it. A piece of work that we hope will have a life of its own and take this story of our little town around the country on a tour maybe even the West End. Who knows? Let's aim for the best. But in 2030, for its premiere, what better backdrop than the streets where it happened? Just imagine Alfie Boe as John Cotton, standing in the pulpit of St Botolph's, where Cotton himself preached, singing to the rafters, surrounded by the people of Boston, by children, community choruses, all telling the story of the place where it happened, speaking in Boston voices. Yes, Doc. And we're not starting from scratch. We're already talking to professional partners. First among them, of course, our great friends and colleagues at Box Clever, based here at Blackfriars. They are brilliant creatives, and we've already been knocking around creative ideas with them. We have 5 years to build this, to find the right people, gather creative forces and build partnerships. We will need all our networks and all our experts and all the books. And some creative genius tempted in to realising it. But we have one more idea, and it's ambitious. What if the musical was in 2 halves? What if one half is the Exodus, first told here in Boston, England, and the other half is the Arrival, told in Boston, Massachusetts? 2 communities, 2 cities, same characters, one story, divided by an ocean, united by our heritage. And we don't know if that'll come off. But if it does, it would spark a remarkable new connection between people and places, between past and present, shining a warmer light on our town. It will bring visitors, investment, interest, and pride. Boston will begin to see itself not as a forgotten place or a place left behind, but as a place of boldness and vision and extraordinary history. A place that helped build a new world, and now a place that is ready to tell its story to the world. Boston the Musical, a tale of 2 Bostons. So, what do we want from you? Not money, well, not right now. Not decisions. We want your engagement. Talk to us, ask questions, help us shape it. We'll do the hard work building teams and raising funds and assembling creative forces. We need Boston behind us. We need creatives, organisations, historians, interested people. And if we're going to do this together, we will deliver something that lifts us all. Some of you in this room may have written stories or plays about the town or about this part in history that nobody knows about. Please tell us, because maybe we can use them. Perhaps we can put together readings or performances with community or youth groups, find other ways to tell the story in the run up to 2030, reach more people. We hope that there will be lots of events planned in 2030. We aspire to deliver a piece of work of sufficient quality that it will have a life well beyond 2030 and beyond Boston in Lincolnshire. Because if we get this right, it delivers value for everyone. It lifts the whole town. It draws attention, investment, pride, visitors, and inspiration. And if you have time, we would love you to stay behind for some cake and tea and simply talk to us, ask us questions, share any ideas, and help us shape what comes next. We know hard work lies ahead, believe me, working out how to deliver this. But we know a good story when we hear one.
Do you hear the people singing the song of angry men? It is the music of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart echoes the beating of your drums, there is a life about to start tomorrow comes. We'll join in our crusade, we'll be strong and stand with me.